Today we're talking about a bunch of shit.
Inspiration.
Yeah, part of it's going to be inspiration, and I think we're going to spin off into some things. So Cub and I were discussing the idea of where to find inspiration, and you can always go on Instagram or whatever your favorite platform, mainly Instagram, and see tons and tons of graffiti. But we wanted to kind of discuss some of the other options that are outside of the graffiti culture. You could look at, of course, other art forms, but some things that I've kind of been noticing is I find inspiration on a lot of different things that aren't even art related at all. So we wanted to just throw some of that stuff out there and see where it goes.
Yeah, you were reading off an interesting list before we kind of opened up. But what was the last line that you had read besides experimentation and what?
Oh, from that book?
Yeah, that last line.
Persistence plus experimentation guarantees success.
There you go.
So why don't we start there, even though it's not quite a...
No,
I guess it is inspiration. Cause
absolutely.
Like, if you're sitting down in front of your sketchbook and you're like, I want to do a wild style, and you've never done a wild style, you could get stuck. I mean, most of us do get stuck before we do it. So just start writing or start doing.
Yeah.
And I was stuck in college once, and I went to this professor that I didn't even have any classes with him, but he was like this famous designer that was he was teaching the master's program there, and I was in the bachelor's program, so I wasn't even going to have classes with him. But I just went into his office, and I was like, hey, man, you got a few minutes? I wanted to talk to you. And he's like, yeah, come on in. And I said, man, I have this project, and I'm stuck. Like, I sit down, and I can't come up with anything. Like, I have to make this movie poster, and it's due, like, in a couple days, and I've gotten nowhere. I'm like, do you have any advice on, like, getting out of your own head and, like, whatever? And he was like, just start making stuff. He's like, don't even think about the concept. Just make anything. Even if it doesn't relate at all, like, just make stuff that you want to make, get into the groove. And then he said, you can even make stuff and then conceptually relate it to your project later and then develop it. And so I started using that as a methodology I found it was really easy to do, but I don't know if it's because you kind of can do that, or if it's like your subconscious mind is making moves for you, you know, because like your conscious mind is always like at odds with itself, you know, like there's all this external shit going on, but your subconscious mind is like, it's kind of got it all dialed in because it's just back there like an engine idling, you know?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I found that, like, I was like, all right, you know, I like images of like grungy shit, like rusty barbed wire and all this kind of stuff. So I just went out and started shooting stuff that I wanted to shoot and videotaping stuff that I wanted to videotape. And then I started like making up reasons why it related to what I was trying to do. And I could find those connections between those two things. So then you could start, as soon as you start finding connections and things start clicking, just the act of making already sort of like gets you in the groove, even if you're still stuck and you're not like, so I wonder how that would relate to graffiti. So if you're like, I want to come up with this new style, but you're thinking about the very end, like you're looking at some graph writer that you really respect, and their shit's like, it's a product of many, many years of development, but you're starting at the ground level and you're looking at it and you want to get to where he or she is. And you're like, fuck. And you're trying to draw what they're doing now rather than just drawing shit and getting into the groove and putting in those years of time to develop into that writer that you want to be, you know?
That's definitely like a conflict that I've always had too, is not taking into consideration all the man hours of things that are shelved that we don't ever see.
Yeah.
That it took them to get to that point. I was just listening to something about the hundreds and thousands of paintings and sculptures that like Picasso created just to get the ones that we know that are famous today, that most people know, right? You don't see all those little mishaps and like the process.
Yeah, there's so many more.
Yeah.
There's probably like thousands times more pieces than you know of.
Yeah, from every artist, graph artist, whoever.
Yeah.
Sketchbooks, stacks, fucking, you know, what we would say are mistakes or like, fuck, I wouldn't do that. But like that's all the staircase to the shit that was their best fucking, the best flick, best whatever we ever saw. Like, fuck, I wish I could do that. Damn, I want to get to that point.
Yeah, they didn't just roll out of the womb and like fucking have that. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think talking about experimentation and wild style, perfect example, even if it wasn't something that we feel that we perfected, which is what we'll also get to, perfection and what that actually means and what the good, bad, but the experimentation with overlapping style in itself when I first tried to do pieces like that, and how much fun it was just to experiment with overlapping and tucking it under and then popping back over and then back under the next piece, and like that whole thing for me was fascinating. And I think the experimentation in that it's just beautiful to touch on things you've never done before, obviously.
Yeah, and the other thing about that stuff that I find myself, and I've thought back over the years when I did try to like break out of my shell, and I feel like right now I'm sort of stuck on this sort of a few things that I like to do, and I still like doing them. And like you had mentioned in a previous episode that like even if you do the same piece, you always learn something, or you find like a little tiny
fine tune
something a little different. And like I'm still feeling like that to a certain degree, and at the same time, I'm starting to be like, okay, you know, I'm feeling a little caged in with the sort of the word's not coming to me, but there's just sort of like toolbox that I go to every time that I draw. So I've actively been kind of like thinking about, okay, what are some things that I can do that are different? And so I started doing this one thing where instead of sketching an outline, I just start filling in shapes. And I was thinking about doing it, and I haven't done it on a wall yet, but I was watching that Helio Bray guy, and like the way that he does outlines, but like when you watch him paint, like the way he does it, like he's just like, obviously he knows where shit's going, but when you watch him paint, he's like filling in stuff, and he's doing like little flare things.
It looks
and
effortless. It looks like mistakes.
But I mean, mainly it's like the way that he paints it's a really loose, like it looks like a lot of fun because for me and a lot of writers, there's like a process, you know, you sketch your outline, and then you do your fill in, and then you do your other fill in color, and then you do your designs inside.
Yeah.
So when you watch him paint, it feels like he's just kind of like laying shit in, and it's all just building over time. And I was like, that looks like a lot of fun. Like what, you know, he has this real kind of precision, kind of cool, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's not like the kind of work that I would want to do, but I wanted to find a style or a way that I could paint in a way that had that kind of like
flexibility and that loose kind of.
Yeah, that sort of loose, because that's how I've been painting lately. But I have been kind of on that tradition of like sketching out your outline, and sometimes I'll sketch out my outline in a light color, and then I'll get a darker color and do my outline again to kind of like polish it up, and then I'll do my fill. And I find myself kind of getting all stressed out during those times, you know, where I'm like, you know, my B isn't quite what I wanted it to be, and like the U isn't right there, blah, blah, blah. So I woke up and I was like, wouldn't it be cool to just throw an Astrofat onto a can and just start filling in my letters and just let it sort of evolve from that.
Right, like with no sketch meaning.
No sketch at all, yeah. And I was thinking maybe even just sort of block out, this is how much room I'm going to take, and my S is going to end here, my B is going to start here, here's the middle ground, and then just start filling in and I've done 2 sketches where I did that with markers, and it was fun. It was a lot of fun to do, and they went really fast, which is another thing. I like stuff that gets done quickly, like before the whole, overthinking and like fatigue starts coming in. Like an hour and a half, 2 hours, if I can do something that I'm happy with in that time, that would be ideal for me. So
It says a lot about just the shit we do on the street, illegal work, and the quality and how beautiful. Like some of my favorites from my affiliates, yours, from you, from myself, have been shit like that where we don't have time to fuck around. Let's just get it in, and then it just, you almost can't even imitate that if you took it back to the studio if you tried. It's like not the same. So if you can like try to harness that, fucking not overthinking it and just killing it.
Yeah,
there is some quality to that you just can't match.
There was a piece that I did in, I think it was 95 at Motor Yard. We were all meeting up for a production. There was a bunch of AWRs, MSKs all meeting at the Motor Yard. And I was in a band at the time, and we were supposed to meet at this, actually they were going to meet me at the Motor Yard, and I was going to go with them, and we were going to buy a van for touring. So I had like this really limited amount of time. And so I just got there and I just fucking banged out a piece as fast as I could. And it took me like 45 minutes or 50 minutes or something like that.
Nice.
And so I knocked it out and I finished it. And I looked at it and I'm like, oh man, I really like how that turned out. And I was feeling good about it. The guys in my band, we didn't have cell phones at the time, so nobody could tell me, hey, we're running late. So I ended up knocking my piece out and just hanging out for like 2 hours after, I had plenty of time.
Yeah.
But it was one of my favorite pieces of the time, and it was like one of those pieces that we were talking about that, where things just fall into place,
It reminds me of what we just talked about when you were talking about, you remember, when you got these particular strokes and this one, but when you believe in it first, like how you just hit that shit right every single time.
Yeah.
It's like that same mentality when you don't have much time, you're just going to get it. You're going to get it in. You got to get it in quick, wherever you're at, whatever you're doing. And there's something fucking phenomenal about that. You almost like turn into like robot computer status where you just fucking hit it. And because you're not overthinking. I think overthinking fucks a lot of shit up.
It totally does.
Always.
I totally think it does. I mean, it might be what we were just talking about as far as the subconscious mind versus the conscious mind. So if like you let yourself start thinking about, oh, this has to be this way and this has to be that way, then you sort of overthink. And things start not kind of going the way you wanted it to.
And keeping in mind that planning it out and having a blueprint is always a beautiful thing, to just have an idea of like how you kind of, we have that idea before we even leave the crib. We already picked out our particular colors. We got our tips. Regardless, I do believe that no matter what tips you have, you fucking make it work. No matter what kind of can you have, if you got skills, you'll make that work too. But we still have some kind of a plan, before we leave. All right, this is going to be the top, bottom. This will be the fill design. This will be the highlight in the 3D or whatever the fuck. But still not having too much, not overthinking it. Yeah, these colors look fresh together. That's about as far as you go. Make sure we have enough because we want to cover the whole thing. That's,
yeah.
If you just kind of leave it at that and then let the rest kind of do its own fucking thing. Yeah. Like we said before, don't anticipate too far into it and just get it.
And that's one way to do it.
That's
I mean,
one
you
way. You see productions that are definitely meticulously fucking thought out.
Yeah, you see like I've seen videos where people hold up the sketch and then they pull the sketch away and the piece is there.
Yeah.
And it's fucking perfect.
Sure.
Like I've done that one time.
I've absolutely
There was
done the
only
same thing.
one single time that I did that because I was like, I wonder if I can pull off doing something exact. Because I've probably brought the sketch over the course of 29 years. I probably brought a sketch to the yard. A dozen might even be too much. Like I almost never bring a sketch to the yard. But again, I don't do anything like that I feel requires a sketch. Like, but there was one sketch that I did and I'm like, I wonder if I can do it exactly the same. And so I really meticulously just every little bump and shit. And then I was even doing this thing where I would hold the sketch close enough to my face so that it was the same size, and then fold it and see if I just really, right. This was one time I was like, I just want to see if everything would come out the exact same way. Mm-hmm. And it did. It worked. It was fresh. Cool. It was a good piece. I still feel it was one of my stronger pieces.
Yeah.
I did in like 2014 or something like that.
Even you make me think about when I first was watching, cats like yourself and your boys because the old Venice Pavilion was one of my first places where I could go and really watch some experienced writers, master their fucking sketch. And I'd see that often. I'd see people with their sketchbooks or their pages. And so I grew up thinking fuck, that's how it's done. That's how you really get a good one in. Don't just go fuck around. And it's funny you mentioned that because now I don't even know where that transition took place, where I stopped thinking that was the way to do it and started adopting, just get it. Just fucking hit it, get up to it, improvise. Because there's a beauty to both, right? But I feel like, to be completely honest, if only I would still practice that a little bit more often. Even if I'm not holding it in my face and getting it, like you were just saying, at least having an idea where shit's flowing and how I'm going to do it. Because, yeah, I got nothing against that. I think that's a beautiful process.
Yeah, you can find a different way to do it.
Yeah, beautiful process, no matter how you do it. You're right.
Yeah, so I think that's sort of in line with what we originally wanted to talk about. Speaking of sketches, we have a sketch for the episode in a sense. You know?
That's right.
So I guess how that could be tied back to what we were talking about is that's just a different way to go about it. So getting out of your comfort zone. If you are the kind of person that needs to have a sketch and you feel like you're, want to break out of your shell, maybe don't bring a sketch and just make it up on the wall. Mm-hmm. There's a risk there because, and we all have this, and I guess not all of us. Some people are probably like, fuck it, I'm going to do whatever. If it looks good, it looks good. But there's always the chance of failing, which is a great thing. Mm-hmm. That's where you grow. You go to failure, like we've talked about before, in exercise and in business. There's an opportunity there. So if you're stuck in a rut and you don't necessarily want to go experiment on the wall, because then that's there. That's in the public space that could be put on the internet. And I just had one recently, maybe 2-3 years ago. I went down to the local yard and I was like, I'm just going to have a good time.
Yeah.
I bet that's how I always paint. But it was a piece that I was like, ugh. That did not come out anything like I wanted to. And I was kind of experimenting with some different things, and I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but it didn't come out. So I took a flick, but I didn't post it. Mm-hmm. Sure enough, day later, so-and-so tagged you in a picture. I'm like, there it is. So, you can't win them all. So, I mean, I think it's good to allow yourself to have those, let's not even call them failures. Well, let's say when we say failure, it's a learning opportunity. So if you do something and it looks like shit, there's good things that can come out of that.
You want to talk about inspiration. When I hear about that kind of stuff and I see somebody like yourself or somebody that I've always been like, how in the flying fuck did he get to be like that? And how did he pull that shit off? And I do sneak up on a piece like that from 97 or 3 years ago. Yeah. And you're like, oh, this motherfucker's human too. Okay. Well, yeah. So he has days like that too. That inspires me. That makes me feel like, oh, hell yeah. So I'm not fucking incapable. It's just we're all human, just like the Picasso thing. Some people just don't see all the things in between. I'm sure if we were to see, and I just use him as an example, but if we were to see other cats with their worst, we'd be like, oh shit, wait, you really did that? Were you fucking drunk? Or were you with your left hand blindfolded driving? No, just a bad day. So okay, cool. So we all can make mistakes, or we can all, whatever. Not even a mistake. We're all just capable of the whole spectrum.
Yeah.
That's inspiring to me.
No, that's a really good point.
Keeps me motivated.
Yeah, because I mean, you do see some people, like there's writers that I've always looked up to that I can't remember ever seeing anything that was funky by them, but like I just saw an old flick of a piece by what was probably my favorite writer, maybe of all time as far as pieces go. And I was looking at it and I'm like, that piece is sick, but there's like a couple of weird little things in there that you look at it and you're like, that doesn't look like it came out the way that he intended it to. And it puts that sort of like human, not everything goes everybody's way, I had something like that happen to me in college. I was heavy into designing and screen printing posters. I think I did in the 4 years that I was there. I might have did more than anybody else in the school. Like I was just printing posters and designing and doing all this shit. I was like obsessed with it. And I had this one poster that just wasn't going my way. And I kept trying to figure it out, and I got the design done, and then I was like, hey, it looks pretty good. And I showed it to some people, and like, I think they didn't want to tell me what they really thought. So they were like, yeah, that's cool. And then when I went to print it, as soon as I printed the second color, I was like, oh, this looks like shit. This is terrible. This is awful. So like I tried to do some other shit and add another color, and it made it worse. And, I'd already bought the paper. It was a wrap, that was what the poster was going to look like.
Yeah.
And so I turned him in, the client, in quotes, because it was this class where they were teaching you how to do, it was like a mini design client thing, but it was clients within the program.
Class. Yeah.
So the design students or whoever was taking this class, what you would do is like, say like the theater program was having a show, and they would quote hire one of the people from the class to print a poster for their show. So you'd have that client designer experience. And so my client was cool with it, but the posters went up around school, and I knew like what my peers were going to think, like, this poster looks like dog shit, and it's got my name on it. And I remember running into some of the students in the master's program, and they were like, there's this poster up and it has your name on it, but it looks like shit. And I was like, no, that was me. I did it. But like at the time I'm still pretty confident in my design skills. So I was like, you can't win them all. I've done like 30 posters that everybody was, not everybody, but like, I got a lot of good feedback from. And then I did this one, threw up a brick, and it's like, hey, it happens. I don't have that same confidence in graffiti, really. I mean, it's like, I like my stuff, but like when I do something that looks like shit, I still, even at 46 years old, I still go, man, I hope nobody sees that,
Sure.
So let's transition.
Yeah.
Or unless you had something to add to that.
I just think that I want to like clarify the fact that I am so incredibly inspired by seeing mistakes and seeing the early progression of writers, of artists, of sculptors, whoever, musicians. I love hearing and seeing their beginning stages. Say it's a musician, their first fucking track they recorded in their closet. For some of my closer friends, we did stuff in the back of an '89 Winnebago, like in the freaking closet, and then you see it progress over the years. I love that shit. That inspires me. Like, but I ain't gonna. I'm not gonna. There's that illiterate side of me. Okay, so I'm not going to discount some of my favorite writers that I fucking, if I don't meet them at some point, I'm gonna assume they're fucking machines, because some of that work inspires me just as much. Like, holy fuck, that's so clean. Like, there's not a that looks like a sticker on the wall. And that I also love. Yeah. I'm not saying that that's the only way to ride, because some of my affiliates and other crews are they're known for their fucking abstract, quick, drippy quick fucking zigzag, no thought. And that shit is fucking incredible too. So I love the whole spectrum. I don't know how else to describe it. It's all fucking beautiful. And then especially when you see that crazy, not too much thought put into the fill, and like you said, like just go, just do a quick fill. No, you didn't even sketch, you just fucking hitting it, and then like it's outlined with like a crisp line. Like even the combination of the two, that's incredible.
Yeah,
So,
the ghost fill
yes.
in like a burner.
Yes.
And you see like sections that are carefully ghost filled, you know.
You know who's a good example of that? Can too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Right? So it's when you started talking about your toolkit of the things that you're used to doing, like I think it's important that we respect the foundation and then the progress and progression of a writer learning all those things. But then once you get to a certain point, being able to fucking kind of slide that toolbox to the side and like crack a new one, and like, or combine the two.
Yeah.
It's getting crazy, which would lead me to the beauty in imperfection and impermanence of what you wanted to tap into, which is the wabi-sabi.
Yeah, actually that'd be a perfect time to talk about that. So you were talking about that loose kind of like, I don't want to say messy, but I guess it is kind of messy, but it's part of the style to have like stuff that just it just flows in, and you know, I missed this line, that's cool, just fill in a little something there. And in the process you get a drip, and it's like, it's cool, I'm just going to leave that drip. I'm even going to stop my highlight before the drip and then continue it after, and just make sure that that's like part of the work.
Exactly.
And that is I always forget if it's like a art philosophy or if it's an art concept. It's called wabi-sabi, and it's I meant to write this phrase down because I get it wrong, but it's a phrase that's used to describe it, and it says, nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect. So when you put those things in your mind, it kind of frees you up a little bit. And so it doesn't directly apply to graffiti unless you let it, you know, because, you know, graffiti has this, a lot of people's graffiti has this thing where like, if you don't nail this, it shows your lack of skills, or if you can't paint, you know. I remember when you'd have a drip in the 90s or whatever, you'd run up to it and like blow on it so that it wouldn't, you know. And so it was like, you don't want to have drips anywhere. It was like a, you know, it was like sacrilege to have a drip on your piece, you know, or like, you know, your highlight wouldn't quite match up, or there was all these kind of little things that you didn't want to happen. But with wabi-sabi, you know, they'll have like a potter, and you know how potters, they have that fucking wheel that, and they spin these like perfect round shapes. But then you see a wabi-sabi pot and it's like perfectly round, but it's got a dent in it, and they just rode with it like that. And they fired it, and it looks awesome. It's like embracing these asymmetrical, it's embracing, you know, wear and weathered shit and old wood, you know, all these kind of different things. So,
which can absolutely translate to graph, which we'll get to. This is totally
and so the way that I've been painting lately, and that piece right there is a really good example. It was just, it's so fun to take those things out, you know, and it's not for everybody. I mean, there's a lot of writers I can think of that everything is real precise, and that stuff's awesome. I personally get stressed out when I feel the pressure of having all that stuff be precise, and like my lines have to be this consistent thing, and the bars have to be consistent, and all this kind of stuff. I find the looser that I allow myself to get, and the less that I am concerned about things like drips and, you know, the can malfunctions and stuff. And you can leave that stuff there. It's sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I hear you. You know, I wrote a few notes about that myself. I was looking at it last night, as a matter of fact. I'm by no means well versed in this area, but I find it very interesting. Like you said, you know, it's they acknowledge the beauty of imperfection and impermanence, things that don't last, and those imperfections, like that dent in that pot you mentioned. And I think originally, from what I read, the interpretation of wabi was like the loneliness of living in nature, remote from society, and sabi meant like chill, lean, or withered. And then over time, they kind of adopted more positive, you know, feel to the word for whatever reason. And one was defined wabi as rustic simplicity and freshness, and then sabi as the beauty or serenity that comes with the age. So it's like you were just saying, like the expectation of everything being so fucking perfect almost kills that joy that we talked about before, when you just enjoy being out there and painting and be fucking loose and just have fun with your shit and be in that serene kind of like nature. You can't really match that, you know? Like when we talked about when we were first in the tunnel or your first bridge in your neighborhood, like that serenity of just whatever, we're just fucking getting it right now and just practicing and just perfecting, well, you know, mastering this craft, and without that expectation of all the other things, like, yeah, like, so to kind of capture that again in the sense of doing something loose and just having fun with it.
Yeah, I made a conscious decision to apply this to my work. And I had learned about this in college. I think it was my second year, so it would have been, I don't know, around 2000 or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until maybe like 2014-ish that I was like, you know, maybe I should feel that out, you know, because you see a lot of writers, like, especially like one of my biggest influences from the 90s was a guy, he started writing Reek from AWR, and then he ended up writing Selfish, and then he had a few years, or I don't know how long it was, but he was writing SE1.
Yeah.
And I had a few great experiences painting with him. Like, I don't remember how many times, but you know, we would meet up at like 4:00 in the morning or something and go paint Venice.
Nice.
And my stuff was real simple, you know, it still kind of is, but so I would finish and he would have like a long way to go. His stuff was real complex.
I remember.
But I would watch him paint and I would be like, in my mind, the goal was to get every line real clean, you know, and hold the can like just the right amount away from the wall to where you got that clean line. It's not fuzzy, but not too close so that it's not, you know, it starts to splatter when, especially with the old tester tips. And when I was watching him paint, he wasn't paying attention to that kind of stuff. He had the can real close to the wall. So the lines looked kind of blobby. But when you step back and you looked at it, it was like all of those, I don't even want to say imperfections. Well, I mean, obviously nothing's perfect if we're talking about wabi-sabi especially, but those lines that normally you wouldn't really be satisfied with if you were going for as precise as you could get with a tester cap. Like, you know, there's like a certain distance. So he would be all up on the wall and just, and the paint's kind of blobbing a little bit and he'd get like a drip, but it was like it all really added to that style. And I was really inspired by it, but I never let that stuff come into my work until later, when I started thinking maybe I should try some of these wabi-sabi concepts in my graffiti and see if it like makes it a little more fun to paint. I sort of liked this kind of grungy kind of vibe that I was doing in my professional work, my commercial work. I do graphic design, motion graphics for like TV shows and stuff, and doing these 3D animations. I always found like when something comes out of the 3D program, it's very, very precise. And so then you bring that into After Effects and you kind of dirty it up a little bit, because then it gives it some realism, because there's no corner of a table or anything that when you look at real close, it has little nicks, and there's never a surface that doesn't have some dust on it or some fingerprints or something along those lines.
Yeah.
When something gets spit out of a 3D program, it doesn't have any of that stuff. So you want to add some of that to start making it look more realistic. And the kind of work that I was more drawn to was like overly adding that shit. Like shit was rusty and bumpy. And so I'm like, I'm going to do that in my graph,
Another thing I found about that serenity that we find when we're just loose, right? And we're just doing what we do. Very few expectations, maybe for ourselves. We got goals for this piece or whatever. But when they talk about wabi sabi, they said, I guess so it's a Buddhist teaching, like it goes back to like that, and understanding loneliness and imperfection was equivalent to like the first step to enlightenment, and like just really embracing isolation and imperfection and just being in your fucking zone is kind of how I take that. Just being in your place. Like when we talk about like painting with like a whole crew, but you just maybe at some points we don't say a word to each other and we're just there and we're just getting it, and being in that place, that therapy is fucking amazing. But that the wisdom in the natural simplicity or the flawed beauty is what they were saying. It's like a flawed beauty.
Yeah.
Right? A word that I always loved to hear was like grotesque enchantment. It's just like a disgusting beauty.
Oh, really?
It's like a two-sided. I heard that from someone that I'd spent some time with a while back, and fucking it just stuck with me. But yeah, man, I think that loose, especially when you, and not to say that anybody needs to like follow a particular guideline and only when you get to this point can you start experimenting with this. But I think there's something really cool about knowing that you've mastered that clean ass line and that perfect fucking highlight and all those things, and then you transition and fuck with that. There's something empowering or like almost like graduation kind of a feel that you can embrace that even more so than say if we were to just start writing with that, which you would see on the streets in a whole nother way of
Well, I see what you're saying. I mean, there's a good point there, because if you start, there's definitely something to be said about. I don't think I've mastered anything in graffiti. I feel like I'm confident in some aspects.
Okay,
but without kind of like going down those lines and knowing like, look, if I really want to do something that looks precise, I can do that.
Yeah.
Do I want to do that now? Maybe sometimes. Most likely, I'm kind of in my zone of wabi-sabiing it up. I'm having a good time with that.
Nice.
But there is definitely something to be said about getting that stuff in your arsenal first. Everybody can go their own path. If you're like, fuck it, I'm going to go loose from start to finish, I don't ever need to do that. It's art. You can do whatever. You can take a piss on the wall and call it art if you wanted to. It's fine.
I've seen it.
I've seen people do it. But yeah, that kind of also reminds me of another thing that I learned in design was, design has this kind of like set of quote rules, and like the, I'm kind of hesitant to say sort of like the higher end design. They say you want to learn all these rules so that you can break them, but knowing why you're breaking them. So like, so you have all these kind of different guidelines in typography and all these kind of things. And so if you consciously want to break those rules, it's good to know them and fully understand them so that while you're doing it intentionally. So like
you're not just disrespecting the beauty of like the history of that particular thing.
Yeah. And that's with design and there's, design has a client. So it's art, but it's art with a different purpose. It's not like, I'm going to go paint on a painting and do whatever I want because it's my art. Design generally has like a concept and a client and a need to communicate a certain thing. So it's a little different.
Got it.
So back to what you were saying about sort of mastering certain things or getting a good firm understanding of like how to do clean, precise lines and all that stuff. As far as I'm concerned, like that would be a good progression to learn that stuff and then break all those kind of traditional rules of not dripping and highlights land in a certain way or whatever. And obviously highlights have evolved over the years. So, I mean, I guess it would be interesting to see somebody that just never cared about that stuff.
Yeah. And, you know, you brought up a good point when we were having a phone conversation and that we can go into if you are willing about the beauty of how we are inspired by the things around us outside, some random shapes in nature, colors and textures and patterns. On the streets, you mentioned some things from light sources. Like, what were some of those examples you were giving me?
Well, for me, I mean, going from doing, so I was a graph writer and then I started doing commercial work in graphic design. I still do it. In the process of learning 3D animation and 3D modeling and lighting and texturing and doing all this 3D stuff, I started just looking at everything in my environment so that I could get a strong understanding of how light hits things, what kind of edges get reflections, and where things, like if erosion was happening, like how does that naturally happen? Like if you see like a pipe sticking out of a wall and over time the sort of oxidized rust shit will run down. Like I was really starting to get an understand like how paint cracked, all these kind of things. So I was finding myself getting inspired by things that I just never would have noticed before. You'd see like a perfect concrete thing, like really precise concrete countertop or something, but then there's like a couple little pieces where there's little bubbles that happen that it's almost impossible, you know, or a little grain of gravel. Back to like the 3D, like that stuff comes out almost perfect. So you have to kind of, you have to consciously put those kind of imperfections that exist in the world. In addition, you also have to kind of like understand, well, not understand, but you get a better idea of how light reacts to things. Because when you're doing stuff in 3D, you're basically starting with like an empty world, like if there was nothing there, and then you put in a road, and then you put in a car, and then you put in a sun, and you see like, okay, the sun is lighting up the car, and it's casting a shadow on the street. If I move the sun over here, the shadow is going to come out like this. So it was all stuff like that was making me go like, oh, that's crazy. If I put a light over here that's shining over here, it's going to pick up these little highlights on the edges of things. And so that kind of caused me to be out on the street, and just anytime I'm out there, I'm looking at that kind of stuff and recognizing like that surface is really shiny, so the reflections are more precise. You can actually see your face in it. But this surface is really dull. It's still reflecting light, but it's doing it in a different way. Another thing is like I started to recognize the difference between shadows. Like a shadow from the sun when there's no clouds in the sky will kind of like create a sharp outline. So if you're standing there and the sun's behind you, you're going to see like a pretty crisp outline of yourself. But if there's clouds in front of the sun, you're not going to see that same thing because the light's diffused. So the shadow is going to be different. It's going to be softer, and the shadow is going to be stronger, like where your feet and the ground meet. So that was kind of a lot of shit.
No, it's good.
But bringing it back to like how you could apply that to graph is you could kind of learn, say, we have this traditional way of doing highlights where you go, okay, my highlights are going to be on the top and the right side of my letters. You try to do exactly that. Mm-hmm. Every top of every letter gets a highlight. Every right edge gets a highlight. And you try to do it perfect.
Right.
Some people, I don't know, not everybody does it this way. But for me, I was like, you know what? Like, doing letters in 3D, I started to realize I'm like, these highlights can land any number of different places, because the top right would assume that there's a light source up at the top corner causing those highlights to happen. But that's only assuming there's only one light source. So it's like, maybe there's a little light over here. Maybe there's a shiny thing over by my B or just below the U. So like this little edge could get a little highlight there. So you don't have to follow that stuff, because that's not how it works in real life in general. So like when you're out, like your truck out there has the sun on it, but it's also reflecting shit from the wall across the street or the car parked behind it. That's all creating other highlights. And so you can apply that stuff to your graph. You can apply all these textures, and you can apply hard shadows, or say, hey, you know what? The fucking light that's causing this shadow on my piece today is diffused, so I'm going to do a soft shadow. So you can do things however you want.
That's I only now am I starting to attack these lessons. I had such a fixed mindset for so long, not wanting to tap into learning these things. I never went to art classes. I never did those kind of things. But now, only now as I move forward, am I fucking into this, and how important it is to learn about light source and natural light and artificial light. Like natural meaning, like you said, like the sunshine outside, and how many different places it's coming from. And if there's a puddle in front of your whatever, and how that reflects back up under. I was watching a video recently about artificial light sources, and for most writers, that's what we do. We imagine where the light source is coming from, and we kind of try to emulate that on whatever. And it was, you know, and how beautiful it is. Like, I think the example I was watching recently was this cat who does animation, and he was doing like a dragon and lava under the dragon, and a moonlight coming from the, you know, top right or whatever. But showing, first of all, okay, if the moonlight's here, this is where our shadows are going to drop under the chin, under the nose, whoop, whoop. And then there's lava coming from up under, so you're going to have the hot red fucking highlights on the bottom, and the moonlight shines on the... So, like, same thing with natural light, you know? So let me back up. So artificial light, you know, you pick your light sources, your amazing masterpiece, and follow those, just like you would anything else. But then with natural light, like you said, off the rim or off the puddle or off the window, all these other, from that natural light source, you see them all hitting all these different areas. And what's amazing with that is once you start understanding that, which I'm only now really looking at, other people like yourself have known this for quite some time, then you can implement that with the color schemes you're using and how you pick your colors. And so let's go back to like planning out a little bit more. Doesn't mean you can't go all wabi-sabi on your shit once you've got all those things in line, but you can still start with that, right?
Yeah.
So that's what's really cool about it too, is like we could have a fucking master plan to colors and highlights and shadows and the layout, and just get fucking loose with it too.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of freedom.
A lot of freedom.
And it also, you know, what I was noticing too is it's sort of like, let's say you have this like rigid top right highlight. I was always finding when I finished those highlights, I'm like, you know, it'd look cool if there was a highlight on the bottom corner over here. But it was against the rules. It was like, right. I'm doing the top right. Yeah. So I can't put a highlight there. Sure. But now I'm like,
why not?
Maybe there's a little tiny light right there that's just causing that fucking one little highlight. So I'm going to put it there. And I love it. I just feel so much better to have a top right. You know, like I'll have a top right most of the time is what I might go to. Yeah. But it's only the main light source. And then once that's all kind of in place, then I go, well, where else could I pop things out with highlights that are against this quote rule of top right? So I'm able to put little highlights in the bottom edges of things, and on the left, just, hey, there's just a highlight on the left on this part, and you know, and to me, it doesn't look wrong. No.
I've been wondering, like, why have I been so, like, someone's about to, like, kick open a door and fucking, like, fucking highlight police. Yeah. Sir. But come with me. That's absolutely how I've been, you know, fixed on that whole perspective of, like, but I can't because it's not proper or it's not right. In the book. Someone's going to rap me on the nose with the rolled up newspaper. No. Someone's going to be fucking on it, but check it out. maybe maybe someone's reading a little book in that corner. There's a little book light.
There's a little tiny book light right
maybe,
there.
Yeah, who knows what it is. Or the highlight police siren fucking glaring on my fucking shit.
And that highlight's blue. It's like, fuck. It could be cool. I mean, I don't know.
Definitely.
Not hating on anybody that totally disagrees with this, because that's fine too.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all
good.
Whatever it is that makes you make the most satisfying work for you. You're at the end of the day, if you're looking for props and fame and all that stuff, that's fine too. But we all know that the main person you're trying to satisfy is yourself.
Yeah.
So
let's just say tomorrow was the last day we had, and we were all just at home by ourselves with our paint, and who the fuck cares besides what you're doing right now anyway?
Right.
What you're getting in this afternoon or this evening, this morning, until you lay your head at night, if you're stoked on what you just did, fucking why can't we just feel that way every day?
Right.
Anyway.
Yeah, so it's your shit.
Yeah.
So if you're a top right, top left, bottom, fucking whatever,
right,
that's cool. If this whole wabi sabi thing sounds completely stupid to you, and you're like, fuck that, I'm all about the precision. If that's fun for you, if that was fun for me, that's exactly the kind of work that I would do. If all the bars had to be almost like you could get what are those little tools that you measure the widths of things?
Like a T-square,
micrometer.
Oh yeah. Right.
If that was enjoyable for me, then that's the kind of work that I would do. So I think some of the stuff we're talking about is these are some things that I personally find enjoyable. Like you and I have pretty good contrasting work. Like you're very precise, and my work these days is not. I guess I kind of go back and forth. Like if I do some bevel type stuff, there's a lot of precision in there.
Yeah.
But there's always some dirties in there. I always kind of blob up the outline here and there. But for me, it's just what is the most fun and the most satisfying when I step away and look at the flick.
Yeah.
I've
been finding a lot of satisfaction in stepping outside that general toolbox of mine as well. Recently, especially, it's growing. Just appreciating the shit that I've kind of turned a blind eye to in my past years. And in saying that, I was just about to talk about... Oh, yeah, so how much more important I believe it is, inspiration, right? To be consistent and what I would tell myself before, growth and progression. Okay, progress, not perfection. The volume of our work over trying to perfect everything, and how much more important I believe that is, and what I've been learning from other artists and other perspectives. And you can apply this to everything in life, but I think it's really important to every single day, no matter what, you pick up that pencil, your paper, you start sketching. Tell yourself you're just going to do 5 minutes. You'll probably do a hell of a lot more. But if you say you're a writer, every single morning, I'm just going to fill in a square, outline it, highlight it, border it, word, done, 3D, whatever. That progress, that constant every single day, instead of no, I work too hard this Saturday, maybe I'll put in 5 hours to make up for the whole week. There's something much more important and beneficial about every single day you make that time. Well, I got too much school, I got too much work, I got my kids, excuse me, my family, I got meetings. I can't something I heard that was interesting. Well, put it on your calendar like you do your family, your work, your errands, your whatever. I have a meeting with my sketchbook at this time today. And every day you have that fucking thing lined up. They're giving examples about some of the most successful people we know in comedy and directors, producers, musicians, and they fucking did exactly that. It doesn't matter how much time it was every single day they picked up their guitar. Every single day they picked up that can. Every single day they wrote some jokes. Every single day there was something to their craft that was just as important as everything else they do. So what I'm saying is the volume of your work, all those things in between your success, all those things in between that huge fucking show or that big movie or that book or that whatever, the progression. And again, these are things that I suggest and that I understand now that are very important, not things that I've absolutely have not applied my entire life, but now that I am, holy shit, do I see what they mean by that. It doesn't matter how fucking, what we thought of it that day, how sloppy it was. I could have done better. Yeah, well, you fucking did it today, didn't you? I guarantee tomorrow's going to be even better. And by the time you hit that wall, that yard, that billboard, that train, that whatever, you're going to be like, goddamn right, got that.
Well, that was something, I don't know if we're going to leave it in or not, but in the book that I just finished today was persistence plus experimentation guarantees success. So
there you go.
Persistence in the sense of, like you said, drawing every day, plus not drawing the same square every day, allowing yourself to get out of that comfort zone. And then also something that you said resonates with me was like putting it in your calendar. Like I've often struggled with maintaining my fitness. Like in terms of working out, I'm really disciplined with my food. So like I don't put on a lot of weight or anything, but like my muscle mass will go up and down because I'll be on it, and then maybe I'll get the flu or something and be off for like a week and a half or get an injury.
Those muscles or whatever, right?
Yeah, and then once a few days off, like it's always been really hard for me to get back into the groove. So I'm like, I'm feeling a little better. I'll start it a little later, whatever it is. It's always been really easy for me to get off of my program until I was like, I'm going to do I put that shit in my calendar, and it's a checklist that I have to check off every day. So I was like, I'm going to read for 30 minutes every day. I'm going to exercise for 45 minutes every day. There was some other shit in there, like drink a gallon of water, stuff that I wasn't doing. And so just having it being part of a thing that like, I have to check it off the list every day. And then when I look at my calendar, I can see all those days where like I have it broke up into half gallons. And so like, there's a bunch of days where I only drank a half a gallon. So like I see all those unchecked boxes, but the workout boxes were checked every time. Yeah. And so now by doing that, like, and when it's conditioned in there,
And when you visually see that, you don't want to break the chain.
No, you want them all to be checked off.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to start putting that in my checklist, like to draw, because one drawing, even if you spend 20 minutes on it, who did that recently is Huffer. He did this thing where he did a drawing a day for 365 days. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he did the whole year. So every day he would draw something, and whether it was digital or I don't know if he painted also, but either way, he had he posted every day. And the stuff that he was doing was awesome. It was like, sometimes it was like this design type thing. Sometimes it was a drawing. Sometimes it was some other kind of stuff.
Nice. But
I remember looking at it and I was like, man, like I should do that. Like I should be doing that, because that persistence of making every day, there's a lot of stuff could come out of that.
Yeah.
Even if you're not trying to spend 4 hours on one thing, like you could just do something to completion every day. Even if it's a loose, quick sketch that took you 20 minutes, just finish it. And then the next day do something else,
Yeah. And I'm so guilty of this thing. What I'm about to say is caring so much about what it looks like or what might be said. Like I said, at the end of the day, I'm like, no, I don't fucking care because you know what the beauty of other people hating or discounting or not believing in your craft is, once you can get over that and really not give a fuck, and it pushes you even harder, that's amazing. Because for myself, like, that's a fucking incredible idea. And the only reason why I haven't done that before is because I cared too much about what it might look like, what it might not. Is it better than my best? Is it all those things? So then that would keep me stuck in pursuing and doing that. But having the accountability. So let's say you get over that. You don't give a fuck about what people think. So now you're consistently pushing them out. And the fact that you're posting it or you're putting it out there for people to see, not just in your sketchbook under your bed, keeps you accountable. Because now you've told everybody. And I had a conversation with one of my best friends, my best boy, about this, about he and I were both struggling with the same thing of getting clean. Okay. And what he did for himself is he started talking about it on social media, and he started posting pictures of his progress and him getting fucking right. And it kept him accountable, and people were on there congratulating him. And hell yeah. It's the same thing as going to meetings and shit and seeing people on a daily basis. You're accountable for what you're doing. And it's another push. It's another bit of inspiration and of your progress, and people calling you out. Where are you at? And how you doing today? How you feeling about it now? Damn, I see your progress. Like, I mean, I may have gone off track, but in the same realm of like him being accountable for his shit, saying, I'm assuming at some point he said, I'm doing this shit every day for 365.
Yeah, he did.
Okay, so there you go. So he held himself accountable, whether he was having a bad, because we all have lazy days or days we want to just watch a fucking flick and not do shit. He's probably like, nope, fuck that. I already told everybody I'm getting it.
I'm going to do it.
So I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And there's something fucking amazing about that. I mean, the obvious of this is amazing. I'm sure most people can agree. So yeah, you know, again, it's like not everything is going to be our best. Do I have love for those whose trail, in a sense, is always just perfection and beauty? Yeah, because I fucking love that too. Going back to, you know, embracing perfection and cleanliness. Like I went to school for jewelry design when I was younger, and sketching and drawing stones, diamonds, jewelry, and everything had to be to the millimeter perfection, right? The fades, the reflections, the this and that. I fucking love that. A lot of my inspiration was from that cleanliness. I gathered a lot of inspiration from architecture. I've always wanted to design landscapes and backyards, you know, for homes. When I was younger, when I was a kid, building blocks and Legos was my fucking jam, like perfection, and everything being just squared off. Even the building blocks that I would stack in the kitchen, my kitchen linoleum had, you know, the squares and the lines, and I'd make sure everything was lined up perfectly on those lines.
Yeah.
Like, so I always had like a desire to like pursue that perfection. Only now, like I said, do I see how one can benefit the other when I start getting loose. Like, start fucking with it. Who cares? Like,
Yeah.
get it. Because I did kind of narrow myself into a box that was like every line's got to hit. So I'm very, not stressed, but I'm very, you know, hard on myself when I go to paint. Doesn't matter if it's legal or otherwise. I'm very like precise. I make sure everything's just so. And so, yeah, so that steered me away from doing such things as what you just mentioned, which is keeping yourself accountable and just push them. You know, I'm sure most of his looked fresh as fuck, too. Maybe to himself, he was like, ain't feeling it, but I got to put one out every day. So
They all looked good to me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I
And
was
see,
like, fuck, he looks like he nailed all
I
of
bet
them.
he did. And so that mentality, hats off to him. Yeah, I'm on the path to adopting that same kind of look and just not give a fuck. If I could even get myself to be consistent with doing social media in the first place, then maybe perhaps I'll have a chance at doing something like that.
That's cool.
Yeah, man. That's cool. And yeah, and one other thing I wanted to say about that was inspire yourself by having a homeboy challenge you, being accountable. Something else I heard recently, somebody was like, I am going to perfect, or I'm going to master, or I'm going to attempt this other avenue that I've never gone into before, and it's going to get to this point by this date. And I'll bet you, or challenge me. If I'm wrong, I'll give you a G at the end of this week if I don't do it. And if I do it, you don't have to give me anything. So it's like kind of setting yourself up in a sense where you're just challenged. And I'm not promoting betting, and I'm not saying don't, but I'm saying like just challenge yourself, or have somebody close to you, like a battle, like anything else that just keeps you hype and like makes you fucking step it up.
Well, and you're also kind of putting you're putting terms on it. I think that's, I don't know. I was talking to my girlfriend about this because we're on this lockdown thing,
Mm-hmm.
and there's all these things that I want to get done around the studio. I'm like, I'm going to use this time to my advantage. You know, I'm going to read more books. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And I have been doing those things. Like I've gotten through a couple of books. or finished up a couple books. I didn't just like whip out a couple books in the last week and a half, I'm not like on it like that.
Speed reading demon.
No, but I just finished 2 books. And, I'm building some things around the shop and stuff, but I was telling my girlfriend, I was like, part of me just wants to sit here and just fucking play video games while there's nobody messing with me and just watch TV and, and I have been doing my fair share of that stuff. And I kind of beat myself up about it a little bit. And I was like, I do way better under pressure. Like when some TV producer goes like, we just fired our designer and we got to get this shit done. It's not enough time, and I'm like, fuck yeah, give me that job. Like, I'd love to do that. Like 2 days, I got you. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
And I thrive under those kind of pressures of like, this stuff has to be done. And I have an opportunity to like excel and surpass somebody's expectations and all this kind of stuff. So the thing you're saying, as far as like, I'll give you $1,000 if I don't do this, by, you're putting that criteria on yourself, or some people thrive under that kind of pressure. There's a lot of people, if you don't give them a deadline, you're never going to see shit.
Right.
And I'm kind of one of those people. Like if there's no deadline and you're like, oh yeah, just get it whenever, then everything else that has a deadline is going to get done first. And this thing that you're kind of whatever about, until it's not the best quality to have, but that's just the way it is for me.
Yeah, I am 100% on that same ship, and always have been. The most successful, the most challenging, the most satisfying things I've ever done in my life have absolutely been under pressure, whether that was our deadline period, the person I was doing something for, or I put it on myself. Since as far back as I could fucking remember, having to study for something, which I rarely did as a youngster. But if I ever did, you better believe I did it like on the bus on the way to fucking school. Or anything, let's just say like I was lucky enough, I was fortunate enough within the past 5 years, 10 years of my life to do some commissions that were very high demand in a very short amount of time. And I fucking thrived, absolutely. And that's when I really started seeing myself, what I was capable of and what I was capable of, period, right? But which leads me to a topic that I want to dive into further at another time, which is how us as graffiti writers thrive in catastrophes and under pressure and on occasions such as empty streets and isolation and, tragedies, of abandoned and broken and fucked up cities and fucking, to most people, it's like, what has happened to my city? And to people such as ourselves, it's like, damn, look at this gymnasium now. Look at all these extra fucking spots and all these windows of opportunity. So, we can find inspiration in everything. There's always that silver lining to everything we see, right? So, and that kind of takes me back to where we were talking about inspiration in general in outside things and when you were in school and the imperfections and wabi-sabi. It kind of all ties back together, right? Like the beauty in the beauty, okay, the sights, the sounds, the smells, right? The beauty in the city, the beauty in that rust and that fucking that bent up and ripped up fucking metal, those broken bricks, the smell of the train yard, the tracks. I can't think of a smell that's almost better than that. Just that smell when you're walking along the tracks, that rust, that tar, the freight, the diesel, like the things you just smell in those areas. The sounds when you're on a rooftop or you're by yourself on the catwalk of a billboard and you just hear like the distant laughter and the nightclub or the smell of the restaurant or the neighborhood barbecue, and like all those things combined are fucking, they just turn me on. Like, I can't even put into words what that is, but that's inspiration. That's that feeling of that. There's such power, and I'm sure there's a lot of writers out there that can agree. And I mean, look where the term heaven came from. I mean, that describes it perfectly. Like that feeling when you're up there and that peace and that serenity and that like we're above the norm, not above as in like superiority, but above,
Literally above.
literally above, yeah. And that feeling of you just can't match this natural, spiritual, emotional high, and the inspiration that comes from the sound of cars passing underneath late night, when you just hear the stream of a shoo, shoo, like the fucking sound of you're in an underpass, a bridge, and the sounds of the pigeons in there like rustling around, and it's just you and the sounds of the sprays and the birds, and like,
Yeah,
it's fucking incredible.
No, I hear you.
So, and I think about it when I wake up in the morning, and now let's say that you're in a yard and you're by yourself in the sun in some chill ass bridge or something, but those sounds and the experience and the mission, the footsteps at night, just creeping, fucking rustling of the tents of the homeless and that whatever the fuck, it's all just it drives me. It drives.
Yeah,
it's a force.
But like as far as like finding inspiration from things like outside of what you would normally expect in terms of like looking at your favorite graffiti writers' techniques or something, you could look at nature for color palettes and stuff. Because have you ever looked at a tree and been like, oh, those colors don't go good together? Like never, or like you see some crazy picture of a frog on like National Geographic that's like all these weird ass colors, but you don't look at it and be like, those colors look like
color
shit
scheme.
together.
Right.
But they, so nature creates these color palettes. Amazing. Or like, the transition from blue to orange of a sunset. And then you look at color theory and, those are complementary colors, blue and orange. Or if you look at a watermelon, it's pink and green. And those are complementary colors, and they just naturally work nicely together. So like, there's so many different places you can look to sort of get your mind going and kind of like get yourself out of something. So you could even say, I'm just going to pick colors of a lizard. I'm going to do a Google search for lizards and then find the wackiest looking lizard you can find. And then your next piece are those colors. Like you could do all kinds of weird shit like that. I don't know where I was going with that. It's kind of weird.
I love where you're going. Myself and the love of my life, we would always look at that. We'd look at sunsets and like, damn, look at those fucking fades. Like you get the most amazing color schemes from sunsets.
Yeah, sunsets.
Natural.
Just the way
sunrise,
I was thinking about this morning that there's stuff that you can learn from traditional typography and like type design and stuff. And most people think like, doing fonts. But there's this other thing that's kind of interesting. And I kind of learned how to do this by doing graffiti. And it's how to letter space. And it's so there's typography and there's type design. Type design is actually designing the actual font, and then typography is working with the type. So when you type out a word, say you're going to have like a design that has like a big word in the middle, you don't just type it and leave it there. Like you type it and then you look at it and you readjust all of the spacing between each letter. Because typically what you want to do is you type it out and then you go between each letter and make little adjustments so that the spacing between each letter is balanced. So the whole word looks like it's spaced properly. So like you have words that don't necessarily set very well. So when you have some letters next to each other, they'll have like a shitload of space between two letters and then not a lot of space between other two letters. And then when you look at it, there's kind of a disconnect. So like two letters will almost look like a separate word. So in typography, it's a rule, but it's not a hard set rule. And when you look at you look at the letters and the spacing between each letter, you imagine how much liquid can fit within those spaces. And then you try to space the word out so that each space between the letters can contain that amount of fluid. So like the letter E will have these little indents and then say it's like next to an N. So then you imagine how much liquid goes in there, and then say like the N is next to an S, and then how it curves in. It's, you can't use it as 100% rule, because some letters have like two straight lines next to each other. So if you put the same amount of liquid, they would be too far apart.
Sure.
I don't know. We might lose some people on this one, but
I follow you.
But when you're balancing if you're going for a very balanced piece to where all the gaps between the letters and the little holes and all that stuff, that's something you can learn from typography, is balancing all those little holes, so that when you have your piece and everything kind of flows, and then you've seen pieces where everything's kind of balanced, then all of a sudden there's like this big opening like on the end between two letters, and it kind of throws you off a little bit. Mm-hmm. There's like things you can learn from typography that may apply to that. But I don't know, that after saying that, it sounds kind of boring.
No, well, not to me. I follow. And I think about that too. Like if you did type something out, let's just say the word fart,
yeah,
and you have an F and then an A, and how that kick of the left side of the A can fucking snug up under that F in that little corner, right? Mm-hmm. And then the ones that don't, when it comes to graph, how we can over and under, how we can overlap and then tuck it under and throw some drop shadow. But you're right, like studying those things, that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's like studying the light sources, natural and artificial, and studying the typography and how those particular font styles can fit into, what do you say, typeface?
Typography.
And then there was
type design.
Type design, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, very interesting. I think these are things that, I mean, I'd recommend anybody to look into. And it can only improve their styles. It can only improve their understanding of what they're doing, and then how you can use a spot. I mean, we've seen so many people, those close to you especially, that have done that. Like a fucking an old, sunken yard in San Francisco, and how like parts of it came out and parts of it are sunk in, and how they use those for their kick or their fucking, but understanding where those letters lay in and how they. I fucking love that.
Yeah,
I love that detail.
That's the cool stuff too. Like when you have a spot that's like a very specific, like there's a hole in the wall and there's a piece through the hole, or some kind of interesting thing like that. That stuff's pretty fun.
It's incredible. You did mention something about how we can understand like color and fills and things by looking at, like, for example, like a chrome bumper. You kind of got into detail about that. Did we already touch on that?
Yeah, I think we did. And there are some kind of interesting things about reflections that, when you look at a car driving down the street or something, and you see that chrome look, like you don't actually see the shit that's reflecting. You just see this overall blue on top and then dark on the bottom and like some weird lumpy shit in the middle. And then graph writers have that traditional chrome style where you do that kind of thing. And there's some weird, I remember not knowing what to put there in the middle, because it was like, what is this thing reflecting? But then you see some people that do the chrome style really well, and they actually have like shit all distorted, because that's what happens when you look at like a chrome bumper and it's rounded. If you really look at it, you can see that it's reflecting trees and it's reflecting other cars in the road and all that kind of stuff. But when you look at it, all you see is chrome. You don't see all those little things. Or when you see like somebody that you see like artists and they do like an eyeball and it looks like just an eyeball. But then when you really look at it,
you see what they're looking at.
You see what's reflecting in there. Like there's something really interesting about that.
Absolutely.
I've never tried doing that, but when you see that kind of art unfold in a video, it kind of takes all the mystery out of like, how do you make something look like chrome? And it's like, well, you just paint in the shit that it's reflecting. That's what chrome is doing. The distorting and bending is some other kind of talent to be able to figure out how to do that. But
yeah. And then going to these outside sources and really taking a hard look. Like, here's another positive thing about doing something every day. Also stepping away from work for a while and going out and gathering all these inspirations from outside. Like, how am I going to fucking how am I going to do chrome in my piece today? Go out and look at some fucking chrome bumpers, bro.
Yeah,
take some reference
pictures.
shots. Yeah. One of my favorite artists that's affiliated from a crew that we all know does a lot of birds and things of that nature in his fucking masterpieces. And I've seen him go out and do just that. He'll take pictures live, go out on a boat, go out in different places, watch them interact and shit. And you can tell like that, on top of the fact that he's a phenomenal artist, but those kind of details of really paying attention to the natural state of that thing, you really fucking take that back with you. I mean, at least from what I've seen him do, it's fucking incredible. And I hope to do that more often myself. To just take a minute, go out and really absorb what it is you want to fuck with, and see how it's done, see how it looks. Like imagine doing just a particular tree, and like how much there really is to that tree. You just get out there, look at the sun, look at where the sun's at, how it's hitting each individual leaf and branch, depending on how that branch is twisted and connected, and all the different leaves and how the leaves are turned up. Like there's so much to it. If you really get into it and you understand even just one branch and one set of leaves, then you can fuck with the rest and have an understanding that you probably never thought you'd have.
There's something to be said about that for sure, as far as like looking at how things really look. Mm-hmm. Because I think as artists, a lot of times you draw or paint or create what your perception of what that thing looks like, and it's not really what it really looks like. So if you're going to draw a tree and you're painting in the bark and all that stuff, and I've done this, that mural we did in Pico Union, I did all the tree trunks or the tree.
That's right.
The fuck are those things?
Yeah, the trunk and the
trunk,
the branches.
Right?
Yeah.
I didn't look at a reference. I just did it like how I thought trees would look like. I was happy with how it came out.
Sure.
But at the same time, I'm just painting like my perception of what a tree looks like. It's not really what a tree looks like. If you look at a tree, you'll find all kinds of different bumps and cracks and all this kind of stuff that you don't normally imagine. So, I mean, right. I think there is a lot of value in looking at
the imperfections.
Imperfections and just looking at how things really look.
Yeah.
Like you have a preconceived idea in your head on what rust looks like, but then when you really look at real rust, you'd get a whole different perspective on how that actually does look.
Another writer that we know that does that, who does like train panels on canvases or whatever, and they're fucking amazing because he really studies that shit. Every rip, every tear, every fucking hole on a freight panel is emulated. Like you really think you're staring at a fucking photograph.
Yeah.
I love that type of shit.
Yeah, so that's cool. I mean, looking at there's so much. I mean, it's like we could just keep talking about it. I mean, I think it's like the idea of just kind of like getting the idea that you don't have to just look at graffiti or whatever kind of art you're trying to do. I mean, we're focused on graffiti, but you don't have to just look at graffiti. You can look at like so many different things. I mean, you could look at just, I was sitting just yesterday and I was just looking around and I was like, man, that's really interesting what the light looks like on that plastic box right there. Like just, there's so many things that you can learn just by looking at things that you look at every day, but you don't think about it.
Yeah.
You know,
inspiration is everywhere. I think that's, where we started with this. You can pull it from every corner if you're aware. If you're in a position to soak it up and be like, all right, I'm sitting in my kitchen. Oh, here's a good example. Fucking cereal boxes. Like I think about it all the time. Were they biting writers or are writers biting this box?
Yeah.
Because these letters are fucking sick.
Yeah.
These highlights are perfect. Everything on here. I think about that all the time. Like I'll be stuck in the cereal aisle just like, damn, those letters are fresh.
Captain Crunch had some skills.
Straight up. It's like, that's a great example. I just saw a writer did that on a train this week. And
really?
And it reminded me of that. But he did something even fresher to it. But yeah, those sunken in, indented fucking letters with the sick fill and it's just, you can go on and on. But I definitely find myself staring at lettering and highlights and color schemes and borders and shadows on products constantly. and definitely believe that there's a lot of writers that are working in that field, or you know, those that are taking it from. Look at the buses, look at the billboards, look at the way they emulate graph, and how graph probably inspired most of the way they advertise on everything today. I love that shit. Another thing I was gonna say, fuck, whatever. But yeah, man, inspiration comes from every angle. Logos. When I first was turned on to lettering and logos was when I was probably 6 or 7, and one of my family's best friends that we used to go visit, he designed movie posters. He was a very famous designer and artist, but it was back when everyone did it by hand. Everything was done with pencil and a pen and a fucking T-square in their garage or their studio. It was none a computer, nothing. And I was so fucking fascinated by his perfection and his the composition, the proportion, just how perfect these fucking letters were. Yeah. And it's 3D and all that. I remember the first time I saw that, I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Somehow I'm going to perfect like lettering. Lettering was just fascinated by it. I mean, even mail. I'm fascinated by people's handwriting skills, and you know, someone's mom who doesn't even think she can write well, like how she connects all her letters. Like I'm fascinated by that shit. Yeah. I fucking love it. Yeah. When I had to spend some time in not so nice places, I used to just be fascinated by people's different hand skills and writing skills and how they did their addresses and this and that. And I was in a position where I saw a lot of mail come in and killed time doing that. I love just looking at the...
It's just such a good example of like how there's shit all around you that you could pull from. Yeah. Like even that fucking Home Depot bucket right there looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know?
Just the layout. Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, I don't know. I feel like we're kind of winding down a little bit, but I thought that was... So, I mean, hopefully that, you know, hopefully that was pretty clear what we're trying to do there. Just trying to give people some ideas on different things you can look at.
Yes. You know, inspired by all the things. If it's not just the people closest to you and your kids and your family, your loved one that inspires you to do better and to get out there and kill it. I mean, just look around the room. If you're sitting there by yourself right now, I bet you're sitting in a room where there's something in there that'll inspire your next set that you didn't even notice before.
Yeah. A poster or fucking... a piece of mail that's
damn right.
On the desk. Anything.
All that. It's a beautiful day to be inspired.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up.
Well, what I do want to reiterate is if we are to ask anything of those who have taken the time to support and listen to us, it's to share that with somebody else that needs to be lifted up, to inspire, to shine some light on.
We really are trying to just put out good information to help the culture and make the 20s the golden era of graph.
That's right.
I don't know if we can do it, but I believe we can, and that's what we're going to try to do. So
we appreciate all of you.